In the hinterlands of Kiara, friends exchanged stories at a small bar, and the conversation flowed back and forth. Among them was Mr. Zai, a man who mocked everything, saying he didn't believe in ghost stories, much less in werewolves. "Ha, werewolf," as he used to say, lol, "is just a bunch of nonsense for weaklings," said Mr. Zai. One man among them became serious and said, "Weakling is it, Zai. Let's see if you'll have that courage when you see the creature." He grabbed his booze and left. Mr. Zay and the others stayed there until the bar closed. On his way home, Mr. Zay spotted a big dark dog in the middle of the bush, with an abnormal body, its back higher than its front. A very strange creature devouring a pig. Mr. Zay looked at it, trying to figure out what kind of animal it was, when the creature looked at him with its red eyes and a piece of pig in its mouth. Mr. Zay ran and knocked on the door of the first house he saw. When they opened the door, he quickly entered and told the homeowner, whom he knew, "What's the matter, Mr. Zay? Tell me, man." Mr. Zay then explained what he had seen. The man said, "But Mr. Zay, that's the werewolf you said you didn't believe in." Mr. Zay stayed there until dawn. The next afternoon, Mr. Zay went to the bar, and there was that man, so Mr. Zay said, "But man, I saw him." The man said, "Saw what, Mr. Zay?" Mr. Zay replied, "The werewolf." The man smiled and said, "Well, didn't you say he didn't exist? That it was just a bunch of nonsense for weaklings?" "Well, I'm going home, Mr. Zay, because that pig didn't sit well with me." And he left. Mr. Zay, upon hearing that, trembled more than a green stick, because Mr. Zay hadn't told the man that the werewolf was eating a pig. After that, the man moved to another town and the werewolf was never seen there again. I have 3 more brothers, and I was the only one born in the interior of Minas Gerais, really deep inside, called Sapucaia de Gonçalves. I moved to BH when I was 1 year old, but every year I would go back to see my late grandmother about 3 times a year, because I really liked it there and loved her. There was a neighbor named Badengo, a very black, bearded, and hairy man. I was about 6 or 7 years old when I went there to see my grandmother, and everyone in the town, literally everyone, said he turned into a werewolf. There wasn't a single person who denied this fact. Because it was an area with a lot of woods, soccer fields, and waterfalls, by 6 p.m., there was no one on the streets. Sometimes I thought this guy's story was a lie. He was always very nice to me and my brothers, treated us well, picked fruit from the tree for us, etc. One beautiful day, on a full moon night, around 9:30 p.m., my brothers and I were playing on the street, and the city lights went out. Everyone lit candles and so on. We stayed on the street playing for about 20 minutes, until I saw this guy at the back of his house standing in a corner, and I could only see his eyes shining a bit and a little reddish looking at us. I told my brothers, "Let's run into the house." We ran. I fell on the street and scraped my knee, got up and ran, only I saw that scene of him in the corner. I closed the whole house and told my grandmother what I saw. My grandmother asked to close the whole house, and my uncle also believed me. After all, he was born there too and knew about this guy. In short, it was never a lie when they told us he turned into a werewolf. At a certain time of night, everyone already in bed, me with my uncle and my brothers together in other beds and rooms, I heard heavy footsteps that weren't from a dog, because there weren't many street dogs there or in residences, but the ones that were barked like crazy. The footsteps were getting closer and closer to our window, and there were loud snorts. With wide eyes, I heard everything. It was getting light. I asked my brothers if they had heard anything. They said they didn't hear anything, didn't see anything. I told my uncle and my grandmother. They also didn't hear, slept like a log. The next day in the morning, I had breakfast and went to his house to see if he was there to pick some mangoes for me, but he wasn't. He was missing for 2 days. I asked his wife, and she really confirmed that he turned into a werewolf and stayed away for a few days, Even so, I didn't stop liking him, because he was always very nice to the family. I went to his house and everything. So I went to see the mango tree. In the back of his house, there were many mangoes on the ground, broken branches, and so on. He must have left through there. I'm 27 years old now, and I remember everything perfectly. And he's still alive. I just don't know if he still turns into a werewolf. Besides, they smell awful. My goodness. End of my story. My parents went there this Easter week. When they come back, I'll ask them. I'm going to tell you about an experience I had in 2017. I was dating a girl who lived in Kabusu. If I'm not mistaken, it's a neighborhood of Nova Iguazu in Rio de Janeiro, and I lived far from her. At that time, I was only 22 years old and didn't have a car, so when I went to her house, usually on Fridays, I stayed until Sunday so I wouldn't have to go back on the same day because it was impractical. Her house was really far away, like in the countryside at the foot of the hill. I used to tease her because it was a very different experience from mine. The houses around were very distant from each other. My parents even complained to me, saying, "Where did you get yourself into?" Ha 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 ha. Her grandfather lived with her, and he used to tell us many stories that in that region there was a werewolf and that it wasn't good for me to arrive at her house at night. When you're young, at 22 years old, you think nothing will ever happen to you, right? But at the same time, since I was 18 years old, I've had the habit of carrying a pocket knife. I even have a collection. So, it was on a Friday that one of the worst things that ever happened to me occurred, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. I was going to her house, but I arrived a little late, around 9 p.m. It was the last bus, by the way. I got off the bus at the main road and started walking to her house, which was on a quiet little street surrounded by bushes. Suddenly, I heard a loud and strong noise, like a deep breath, coming from the bushes. I got scared, but still kept walking. I walked a little more. When I was about 50 meters from her house, I saw a creature coming out from behind the tree that looked like a mix between a dog and a pig. It was black, had big ears. It didn't see me. I froze and stayed silent. I took out my pocket knife and whispered, "God is with me." When it turned towards me, about 10 meters away, and saw me, I panicked and remembered what my girlfriend's grandfather used to say, that when he saw something strange, he should scream loudly and never turn his back on it. So I started screaming and screaming, and suddenly that creature jumped high into the woods with great ease and disappeared. Then I saw the opportunity to run to her house and told her grandfather what I had witnessed. And he told me to never arrive late at her house again, because he had seen the same creature. I wouldn't wish what I went through on anyone. I never want to see what I saw again. After a few months, I ended my relationship, but not because of this reason. I just believe that sometimes bad things happen for good reasons, right? That's my story.